When should an S turn into a Z sound when you're speaking English? S and Z are called a minimal pair. That means you do the same thing with your mouth, more or less, but you change one thing. In this case, the mouth position is the same, but for the S, you don't use your voice, you just blow air. S. And for the Z, you use your voice. You feel the vibration in your mouth. Z. We use a lot of Z sounds that we don't write. And that can be very confusing because when you see an S, you want to say an S. But actually, the sounds around the S will change it sometimes and turn it into a Z. Unfortunately, English is full of exceptions, so we can never say this is the rule, it will never change. But generally, if the S in writing follows a sound that uses your voice, then the S turns into its voiced pair, Z. So you would say cats, because the T of cat has no voice. Therefore, the S stays voiceless. It stays as an S, cats. Whereas you would say dogs, and the G of dog, G, uses your voice, and therefore the S gains voice and turns into a Z, dogs. This rule is so deeply embedded into a native speaker's understanding of the language that if you get the S or the Z in the wrong place, we will assume that the sound before it did or did not have voicing, and therefore we'll hear the word differently. So if you say dog and then put an S at the end and you say dogs, we'll actually hear the word docks, where the boats come in. Because if there's an S on the end, not a Z, then it must be a K. It must be a sound that has no voice in it, so it must be docks. That is why it's so important to make sure that you don't just look at the spelling, that you know what the rules are, and sometimes the rule is that there is no rule, so you have to make sure that you learn the individual pronunciations. But that's a good rule to start with. If the sound before it has voice, then the S turns into a Z. And we know, of course, that all vowels are pronounced with voice. Therefore, if you're saying an S at the end of a word that has a vowel at the end of it, then you will always turn it into a Z. So cow, for instance, cow will always be cows. And this is vowel sounds, of course. You might spell cow with a W at the end, but the sound it ends with is a vowel. Therefore, the S turns into a Z. Cows. One of the many complicated things you have to learn when learning how to pronounce English.